أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It'll be a little hard for me to look at those who are sitting behind me, and I don't want to be rude, so if I can ask folks to maybe move to maybe a large circle, inshallah. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Dr. Tahir Khawaja. I am a physician. I'm a child psychiatrist. What that was for folks who sometimes confuse psychiatry with psychology. There's a big difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist. So, a psychiatrist is somebody who goes to medical school, and at the time that I could have chosen to go into family practice or internal medicine or surgery or ophthalmology or brain surgery or something, I chose to go into mental health. So that means that I'm a physician and an MD, and therefore, being a physician, I'm able to help you with your diabetes, your high blood pressure, as well as depression, and able to prescribe medications. And so I'm a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, as opposed to a psychologist who is a PhD. Can we check the plug? No? I don't, oh, the power. Okay, let's hope that comes back on, inshallah. So as opposed to a psychologist, that's a PhD, which is a social science. So those folks will a lot of times do psychological testing, and then a lot of therapy and counseling and so on and so forth. And so the main difference with psychiatry is that they are medical doctors and they are able to prescribe medications like for depression and ADHD. Some of you know me, or you know my kids, so I'm not a stranger to this. My kids are were graduated or are in Tanzil. So I come to this Masjid every day, essentially. So we're going to be talking about teen mental health. So although we sort of called it teen mental health, but mental health for a human being is very similar. For you or your teens, or even your little kids or your older adults, mental health and mental health problems look very much the same. Sometimes we as parents end up feeling like we've forgotten how to look for mental health problems in our kids. But once we get through this, inshallah, you all will inshallah realize that this is stuff that we've seen before. Okay, so what is mental health? When we talk about health, there are multiple different aspects to health. There's obviously the physical health, which is what everybody seems to be familiar with. Physical health. Everyone knows that, okay, I need to control my cholesterol, I need to control my blood pressure, I need to control my sugar intake and my diabetes, and I need to go to a doctor for cancer treatment, so on. Everything about physical health, we're good as people. But then when it comes to mental health, everyone expects us to be good. But sometimes we're not good, right? Sometimes you leave the house after you've had an argument with your spouse, or after your child says, no, I'm not doing that, I'm not going to clean my room, and then they storm off, and that leaves you in a different state of mental health. But the thing is that when I look at you, I just can't tell. And so it's easy to hide. And it's easy for me to just put on a smiley face and walk around and be like, it's all good, I'm fine, no problems, no issues. And so I call that, the way I describe that to my patients is that, give me your favorite soda. Anyone who drinks soda? Sprite, okay, khalas. There's a can of Sprite or a bottle of Sprite, and you decide that instead of letting out the pressure from inside, you're going to tighten that cap. And you're going to keep that pressure inside. And then you're going to shake it up, or you're going to put it in the freezer of life, right? Life, as we go through life, you're just like, man, there's so much going on. I've got to deal with so much. Life is so cold, right? Sometimes life is so cold. And so you imagine that you're putting that can yourself in the freezer of life, and if you don't release the pressure, then what's going to happen to the can? It's going to explode. And yani, you could potentially explode on somebody else or on yourself just because you didn't do what? You didn't do what? All you had to do was do something, and that can wouldn't explode, or that bottle wouldn't explode. What did you have to do? Talk, release the pressure. That's all you had to do. And then that person wouldn't explode. Now, the can may not always explode. I actually did this a few weeks ago. Don't ask my wife about it, but because she doesn't know. And I cleaned it up really quick. But I put a can in the freezer intending, actually my son put the can in the freezer. Where is he? He's here. And he forgot it. And I asked him, are you going to remember this? He said, yes, of course I'll remember it. He puts it in the freezer. 3 days later, I find it in the freezer. Obviously, it's exploded, but it didn't explode. That can, what actually happened was it expanded. The bottom of it is curved, right? So that came out. And then there was a hole in it, and it oozed out the pressure. And that oozing in a person looks like high blood pressure. That oozing of stress in a person looks like diabetes. That oozing can look like cancer. That oozing can look like anything physical that you can come up with. Or that oozing can look like depression or suicidal thinking. And these are the things that I deal with in my clinic. So, what is mental health? Mental health is your state of mind that allows you to be able to see the world in a certain way. Yani, if it's good mental health, then the lenses that you're wearing to look at the world are clear. But this is another example I give to people. Your mental health is literally the color of the shades that you're wearing. And everything that you look at kind of has that red color because you're wearing red glasses, or yellow color because you're wearing yellow glasses. And so that's what mental health is. Your emotional state, your physiological state, your social state. Yani, social state meaning that if your mental health is in such a difficult state that you don't come to the masjid for salah, or somebody invites you, hey, why don't you come to the house for dinner? You're just like, I just don't have the energy. Maybe next time, right? And you're not, what are you doing? You're sitting on the couch watching TV, right? So good mental health helps us. Good mental health translates into well-being. And we've already talked about, and we'll talk more about, how your mental state affects your physical state, right? And we'll talk about this later as well, again, inshallah. So, mental health, good mental health, affects the way we think. And you can understand that if someone is depressed, then the way they think is that I don't want to, I don't have the energy, I don't have the motivation. My dad would, or my husband or my wife would be better off if, right? That's the way you think, and so the scientific word for that is your cognitions, the things that you think about. And these little words in parentheses are going to come up later. So I won't quiz you on them, but we'll talk about them again. All right, so how we think, meaning our cognitions, all right? How we behave, and then our emotional state, okay? So good mental health affects these things. All right, so the Prophet ﷺ said, أَلَا وَإِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةٍ إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله. Right? ألا إن وهي القلب. ألا وهي القلب. That indeed, isn't there a morsel of flesh, a piece of flesh inside the body that when it is salih, when it is good, when it is at peace, then salah al-jasadu kull, that the entire body is in a state of peace or is in a state of goodness. That's what we just talked about. And the Prophet ﷺ has told us this. And isn't there a piece of flesh in the body that when it is in a state of fasad, when it is in a state of corruption, or when it is not feeling well, fasadil jasadu kull, the entire body feels bad. Ala wahiya al-qalb. What does that mean? Ala wahiya al-qalb. Isn't it indeed what? The heart. Jazakallah khair. Isn't it indeed the heart? And what's the ayah in the Quran? Surah Al-Ra'd. About the heart and finding peace. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. That isn't it indeed by the remembrance of Allah that hearts find peace. Right? So, a hadith talking about good mental health, and in particular the mental health that leads to good physical health, which we just talked about. And then an ayah that talks about the same. So, when we talk about good mental health, that good mental health leads to certain types of behavior, right? It leads to your good ability to deal with stress. If you are in a good state of mental health, then you have the ability to deal with stress. Like, for example, during the most recent winter freeze, like the 2 or 3 days that were really cold, how many of you had a pipe that burst? Just me, huh? Okay, khair. Just me, all right? But what about last year in February, when we had like 7 days of no electricity, no heat inside the house? How many of you had a pipe that burst? Wow, just me again. Allahu Akbar. Maybe I should sell the house. Okay, anyway. So what I just sort of shared with you was that very close, back to back, there were 2 episodes of flooding in the house. Right? If a person isn't in the right state of mind, then you can start asking why? Why me? Why me? Right? And that question, if you're in the wrong state of mental health and you turn up to Allah and you start questioning why, that is haram. You're not allowed. Even the Prophet ﷺ, after Ta'if, he walked 2 miles, ran 2 miles out of Ta'if, and he was stoned. Right? And he sits by a tree and he starts to say that ila man takiluni, that to which direction will you turn me next? Right? Now that wasn't a complaint. What he was saying later on in that paragraph was that if you make my I have no problem, as long as you're not angry with me, no problem. Fala ubali, then I don't mind. Right? As long as you're not upset with me. But if you just make it easy, then that'll be easy for me. If you just make my task, my job easy, hiya awsa'u li, that will be easier for me. If you make it easy, that'll be easier for me. And that's the way in which he complained. He didn't say, why did you? Right? Because that question to Allah is haram. So, good mental health leads to you being able to cope with stress, you being able to meet goals and targets at work. If a person is depressed, then they're not meeting goals and targets. And then this in bold, being selfless. if you are not in a good state of mental health and gratitude, then that individual has an inability, doesn't want to go out and volunteer their time. They don't want to go with this brother and pack food boxes. It's just, next time, or something like that. Or go to Helping Hand and pack shipping containers, or go to ICNA Relief and pack, and give food out. So being in a good state of mental health helps the community. When you are in a good state of mental health, it helps the community. And so it's important what we're talking about. And then, of course, the energy to exercise, and then the energy that last point is really interesting. Less physical illness. How does your mental health affect your ability for physical illness, to fight off physical illness? Anyone want to take a guess? Yes, Akhi. Allah, mashallah, yes. It helps your immune system. So being in a good state of mental health and gratitude. Being in a good state of mental health and gratitude, right? How can you, what's the litmus test? When you're going out to the pool, right? The pool or someone's going out to the pool, and they take litmus paper, which tests the pH, right? And you test the water, and you see what color the paper turns. Then you know the health of the pool. And then you add more chlorine, or you add more water, right? So there's a very interesting litmus test to test yourself. What kind of a mental state you're in. And that is your ability to fight off infection. And then the litmus test is, how much gratitude do you show? وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ. What did Allah announce? Right? We make the adhan here. وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ. When your Lord announced, by making an announcement, لَإِن what? شَكَرْتُمْ. What's the next? لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. Now he said, if you are grateful, then I will increase you. Now did he tell you what he will increase you in? No, he left that open. And so it's very interesting that the more gratitude we show, the more Allah increases us, which requires more gratitude. Now He might increase you in recognizing something to be grateful for. The ability to recognize. He might increase you in a stronger immune system, better health. He might increase you in turning that tornado away from your house. He might increase you in saving you from something that was supposed to come to you. لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ. If you are grateful. And so one way to check yourself and your state of mental health is how grateful, how much gratitude, how many times am I saying throughout my day, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, Alhamdulillah wa shukrillah. How many times are you saying that? If you can imagine, if you're not in a good state of mental health, then you're not saying that very often. Okay, so these are the real influencers. You know how we talk about TikTok influencers, right? These things are the real influencers in your life. And there are 3 that we talk about I work on an inpatient psychiatric unit in a hospital. So psychiatric patients who are admitted, we help them get better. But and then we have a clinic in Coppell. And so when we're talking to other staff members, like psychologists or other psychiatrists or whoever, we're presenting each patient in this way. Biologically, what's happening in this person's life, psychologically, what's happening, and socially, what's happening in this person's life. Now, I like to add the spirituals of bio, psycho, social, spiritual. And that's an important distinction, and we'll come to that, inshallah. So biologically speaking, When we're talking to another staff member, for example, or when we're talking to somebody about a person, what are the biological influences in your life? A lot of times when we talk about biological influences, it's the proteins that your body makes, right? The proteins that your body, where does that code come from? That, okay, we should make this protein. Where does that code come from? The DNA, right? And DNA is your genetics. Exactly. Now, and also your chemistry, your blood chemistry, like how much salt you have and how much glucose is in your blood, all of that influences your mental health. And then, of course, drugs and alcohol are also biological influencers, or even the food that you eat has a biological impact upon the way you feel. Case in point, when you go, so we won't talk about any specific restaurant, but when you go to a restaurant and you have 3 cheeseburgers, and you've got these fries and cheese on the fries, and then you've got the shawarma and the beef, and you eat it all, and you're just like, oh my God, this is so good. But then an hour later, you regret it, right? So the food that you eat, and then maybe even a day later, when you eat desi food, it's hot going in, hot coming out. So you're not feeling very good biologically, right? When about a couple of days later. So these are the biological influences or influencers in your life. Psychological influencers, right? What are the things that impact our psychology? The lenses that we wear, that we see the world through. A lot of it is your home environment, right? And then the place that you grew up, how your dad or your mom treated you. Those are things you remember. And as parents, those are things your children will remember. They will. They won't remember the good food that you make for them, the healthy food that you make. They won't remember that you drove them to school every single day. They'll remember the time that they asked you for something and you're just like, get out of here, I don't have time for, whatever. That's what they'll remember, right? And so it's important for you to be in good mental health so that you can treat the people around you well, so that their psychological upbringing is healthy. But if you're not healthy and you're ignoring it and you're saying, I'm fine, and you've got 100 people telling you that, no, akhi, ukhti, there's a problem, there's an issue, no, I'm fine, then what's going to happen is that will translate to the next generation, and then the next generation, and then the next generation, and so on and so forth. Because that's what you've taught your kids. So the home environment, the school environment. So school, kind of has a social aspect to it as well, which is next, right? And then your own experiences. Were you bullied? That's sort of that psychological impact, but also a social impact, right? So the next slide is social influencers. So you guys tell me what could influence a child or you, socially speaking? Social media, okay. So, give me examples of stuff that could impact you socially. If somebody says some sad news, okay. Bullying, that's exactly, right? So bullying is a social impact, which has psychological influences, right? So bullying, so your school environment, your friends and your peers. So somebody said social media. If you get that thumbs down on a post, nowadays, that really impacts people, our kids. And so our job as parents is not to tell them, don't get on social media, because guess what they're going to do? They're going to get on social media. So then you have to then learn about how social media works, and then you guide them through that process. That, okay, this person keeps giving you thumbs downs, why don't you, do whatever the right thing is for you to tell them. So family, so Yani, I'm telling you that social media in itself, Yani, there are certain types of social media that obviously when you're texting certain photographs of yourself or receiving photographs of somebody else, that's haram, period. Yani, let's call a spade, right? But then other things that, you're posting stuff about how you feel or what's going on or what happened in your day or you're interacting with friends, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. But then the problem is that this is new to us who have white, Yani, those of us who have white beards and who we remember life when cell phones didn't even exist. We are the ones that used to use CD-ROMs, right? So then when we've got all this social media stuff going on, it's like, what is this stuff? I don't understand. But then this is what your children are using, this is what your children are doing, whether you like it or not. And so then, there's nothing intrinsically haram about it, or wrong with it, except what you do on it. So then it becomes important for you, just like you tell your kids, on this TV screen, some of us remember life without TV. There was no TV. But then what did our parents do for us? They said, on this screen, you are allowed this and not allowed that. And that was the guidance. And now, Yani, there's still some questions about TV screens and so on. But so then the same thing is what you have to do with social media. All right, so social influence. So these are the ways in which we think about our children, our patients, or the way you think about yourself. Now, so biological impacts, things that you eat that you have direct control over. Psychological, their home environment is significantly important. And the social environment, your friends. Now, the fourth thing that I add to this is your spiritual influences. And this is a place where we as Muslim parents kind of trip up a little bit. Where we tell our kids who are coming to us and telling us, Mom, Dad, I feel depressed. I'm feeling suicidal. I just took something and cut myself. These are things that I deal with. And then you're telling them that you just need to pray 2 extra rak'ah and it'll all be better. Or you're telling them that you need to go read more Quran. Our community is mostly Desi folks here. Do we understand what we're reading? No. So then how is Quran going to benefit? It has its own benefits because alif is a letter, lam is a letter, mim is a letter, and you get 10 hasanat, 30 hasanat for a total. So there's a benefit in there, yes, absolutely. We're not going to negate the hadith. But we haven't taken the time to teach ourselves Arabic and our kids Arabic so that when they understand when they read وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, right? That they should understand it and they should be like, you know what? Yeah, you're right, Mom. Thanks for telling me to read more Quran because I should be more grateful in my life. That is not happening. Okay, so then if we tell them that ignore the biological and the psychological and the social influences and just go and read more Quran, yes, there's benefit in Quran, but you're taking 25% of that child and you're saying, just focus on this because all the other stuff is irrelevant. Does that make sense? But this is what we do. This is what we tell our kids. Kind of puts it in perspective, right? Yes, making the extra rak'at are good. But then you ask them, what are you eating that's making you feel down? Let's evaluate that. What are the genetic influences that you've gotten from me? What are the psychological lessons that I have taught you, my child, and that you've learned from me that are influencing your depression? And what are the social constructs in which you are growing up? What's going on at school that you're depressed? Are you making your prayers? Are you reading your Quran? Okay, these are the 4 things that we need to focus on. On the other hand, if you ignore the spiritual aspect, and perhaps I'm talking to, we're talking in a masjid, so most likely the parents are not ignoring the spiritual aspect. It's mostly the children who are ignoring 25% of their existence. They say, I don't need to pray. Ain't nobody got time for that. I don't need to read Quran, whatever. I'm just going to go and eat, drink, and be merry. So that child is ignoring a quarter of themselves. Because Allah told us that He gathered us. We were there, I was there, I don't remember it, you don't remember it, but we were all there. And He said, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And we said, Bala, you are our Lord. And so therefore, when every child is born, they are looking for a God. They are looking for something to worship. Sometimes it's Michael Jordan, sometimes it's LeBron James, sometimes it's Jesus Christ. And over here, sometimes it's Allah. Other times it's myself. Other times it's I ain't got time for that. So that child is ignoring 25% of their own existence because Allah has created this in us to seek a God. And the way that you, whether adult or child, can determine what you spend time with, the way that you can determine what you spend time with, what you worship, is the thing that you spend time with. If you know LeBron James's stats cold, top to bottom, that might be something that you spend more time with than Allah. And so then you have to think about, is this something that I worship instead of Allah? So, biological influences, psychological, spiritual, these are each 25% of your life. And spiritual is, each of these is 25%. So when somebody comes to you and says, I'm depressed, when somebody comes to me and says, I'm depressed, I'm evaluating these 4 things. And I will ask, whether you're Muslim or not, that are you a God-fearing person? And if they say yes, then in a non-denominational way, I'll ask them, how much time are you spending with your concept of God? Right? And some of that, they'll ask me that, oh, how much should I drink? And I'll tell them, none. So some of that I'll try to provide some da'wah, but then in my behavior and my look, I want them to know that I'm Muslim. Right? And so then I want them for da'wah to be given regardless. Khair. All right, so mental health in teens. Let's talk about some statistics. What happens to our teens nowadays? All right, so here we have a really thick slide, all right? But I'm going to tell you where to focus your attention. 20% of our youth, ages, what is that? 13 to 18. 20%, 1/5 of our youth today, nowadays, in the United States, have a mental illness. 1/5, 20%. Are you listening? 20%. Is that small or big? 1 in 5 kids has a mental health condition. Are you telling me that your child is immune? Yani, كيف? How? Guess it. How are your children going to be immune? That makes no sense if you believe that your children are immune and then therefore you don't want to have a conversation with them. It makes no sense for you to think that your child is immune from a mental illness and then you refuse to have a conversation with them. Hey, son, do you know what depression is? Let me tell you what depression is because I looked it up on Google. This is what depression is. Does this describe you? Hey, daughter, do you know what anxiety is? Let me describe what anxiety is. Does this describe you? Hey, son, daughter, wife, husband, whoever, do you have ever any thoughts of wanting to hurt yourself? Asking the question does not increase the chances. Asking the question reveals to you that your child needs help, or your wife needs help, or your husband needs help. Do you ever think that I would be better off if you weren't around anymore? Does that thought ever cross your mind? This is the way to ask about SI, suicidal ideation. Do you ever have the thought that you want to actually kill yourself? These questions are important because the third leading cause of death amongst our teens today is suicide. So 20% of them have a mental illness from 13 to 18. And then from 10 to 24, the third leading cause, the third most common cause of death. Yani, if I were to tell you that the most common cause of death in something, or the most common reason for cancer is ABC, would you avoid ABC to prevent cancer? If I were to tell you that the third leading cause of something is of cancer, the third leading cause of cancer is XYZ, would you avoid XYZ? Then why, the third leading cause of death in our teenagers is suicide, but we don't want to talk about it. No. A'udhu billah. Just go pray more. Go read more Quran. Part of it is that we have created this stigma ourselves and we perpetuate, no, not in my house. Mere ghar mein nahi ho sakta. No, it can't be in my house. Right? Because this is a matter of honor. This is a matter of, you're supposed to be Muslim. We have, but the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah fil jasadi mudghah, isn't there a piece of flesh that is the heart, that if the heart is good, then everything else is good. If the heart is ill or diseased, then everything else is ill or diseased. And yes, rightly so, we take that to mean, to relate that to your deen, but then you can also relate that to mental health. Depression and anxiety in teenagers, girls more than boys. Depression and anxiety, girls and women more than boys and men. Sleeping issues, withdrawal from family, and aggression about equal in boys and girls. So about 36% of girls, teenage girls, are depressed. 36, 1 in 3. And about 1 in 3, so 1 in 3 have anxiety, 1 in 3 approximately have depression. These are staggering. 30% of the, imagine from COVID, 30% of the population got wiped out. Would that be something significant? 30%, 300 million people in this country, 100 million, boom, gone. Would that be significant? Would that be something you'd pay attention to? So I'm telling you here, or these statistics are telling you 30% of our teens, our girls, have depression. 30%. And then 90%, so 9 out of 10 people who committed suicide had a mental illness. What does that mean? 9 out of 10 had a mental illness before they committed suicide. I'm going to repeat that. 9 out of 10 had a mental illness before they committed suicide. Could that suicide have been prevented? You think about that. Yes, Akhi.
What's the difference between depression and anxiety?
We'll talk about that, inshallah. Well, the question was, what's the difference between Depression and anxiety. We'll get to that. I might be one of the next slides. So 9 out of 10 people had a mental illness before they committed suicide. What does that convey to you? It's avoidable. Allah, jazakallah khair. You want to come help me with the lecture? MashaAllah, MashaAllah, jazakallah khair. It's avoidable. Yani, if you just paid attention. If you just paid it, we have had Muslim youth in our community in Dallas that have committed suicide, murder-suicide. How many of you remember that? I saw kids that came to me after that. They're the friends of the family. And I had to deal with that. And then we have other kids that we have prayed janazah on. But 9 out of 10 of them had something that was noticeable. Depression, for example. And if we had just said that, hey son, hey daughter, hey wife, hey husband, this is what depression says, I'm kind of noticing something, does this describe you? And then for the questioned, the one who is asked, to be honest with that response. So this is according to the National Association of Mental Illness, NAMI, N-A-M-I. That's a huge organization in this country. So, now, what is it that we should be looking for in our, I'm going to kind of speed up just a little bit because I want questions. All right, so what is it that we should be looking for? Now, a lot of times how many of you here have had children, babies? Yes? 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 Okay. So, when you take that baby to the pediatrician, and there's something wrong with the baby, now can the baby tell you, hey dad, I'm not feeling well? No. So then you're reporting to the pediatrician. What are you telling the pediatrician? The baby is not? What? Okay, so tell me what you bring the baby to me, or you call me, hey, Dr. Khawaja, my kid isn't feeling well, what do I do? And I'll be like, okay, what's going on? And you're going to tell me? Tell me. He's throwing up. Biological sign. Okay. What else? Not sleeping. Biological sign that the kid isn't doing well. What else? Crying. Psychological sign that the kid isn't doing well. What else? Behaving differently. Okay, good. So that's a very broad term. Can somebody say again? Okay, so crying, a tantrum at light things. Oh, inconsolable. That's excellent. Jazakallah khair. Become aggressive with other kids. So we're talking about little infants, but yes. So if they're a little older, they might be. Okay, good. So here we have the biological report that you would give to a pediatrician. The kid is not eating, not sleeping, and not toileting properly, right? The pediatrician, I'm going to ask you, how many diapers are you changing? But the interesting thing is that once our kids become teens, all of a sudden, we seem like we forget about these symptoms. For our girls, forgive me for speaking about this on the musalla, but it's biological. You can ask, how many pads are you changing? If it's higher or if it's lower, it's significant. You can ask, how many times are you going to the bathroom? Boys or girls, it doesn't matter. But that can indicate anxiety or it can indicate something else. Are you sleeping? So these are the things that you report to the pediatrician about your babies, but then all of a sudden, for some reason, we just forget about them when the kids become toddlers or teenagers. So the same symptoms, the same things that you would look for in an infant, you're going to look for in your older kids. So changes in biological functioning, changes in psychological functioning, crying, restlessness, inconsolability. And then I have self-injurious behavior, because obviously an infant isn't going to do that. But that is something to look for, self-injurious behavior. And now, question. Is all self-injury hospitalization? Is all of it suicidal thinking? Every self-injury, okay, I'm going to make a statement, true or false. Every time somebody injures themselves or cuts, even if it's shallow, tiny cut, that is a suicidal behavior. True or false? Somebody said true. اختلف العلماء. Somebody said true, somebody said false. Okay, so what do? Is it true or is it false? False. Oh, a young person said false. Yes, it's false. Okay, so I'm going to repeat the statement. I said every single self-injury is suicide. That is false. But who is allowed to make that judgment? Is it you? Is it you? Can you say, okay, no, this is not suicidal behavior? Are you allowed to make that judgment? You are not allowed to make that judgment. So then your job is to get somebody who knows that is this suicidal or is this not? And then that person has to talk to the kid, okay? But to kind of reassure you a little bit, so somebody, for example, might take, so for the same reason that people turn to alcohol and marijuana, it's because they want to forget about their stress for a little while. When you have a bowl of ice cream, or when I have my cup of chai, desi chai, yaar, am I thinking about life? No, I'm just, man, this ice cream is so good. So we all have those things that we do. Is ice cream constructive or destructive? Yani, it's destructive, right? But it's not admissible in a hospital, right? So self-injury and alcohol and marijuana and cocaine and heroin and all these other things, a lot of times people do that to relieve some stress. So then the job, if you notice that, you get that evaluated, you get that checked out, even if you've got to call 911, go to the ER, or take them into a hospital, urgent care, and say, hey, this is what my kid did, what do we do? And then they'll say, okay, no, it's not suicidal, you can go home. Then your job doesn't stop there. It continues that, okay, what is that stressor? Now, you don't want to start peppering questions, right? So you do it gently. I always talk about having ice cream, right? Where you say, hey, there's something going on, son, let's go have ice cream. Hey, let's go grab a Starbucks and let's just talk. Hey, daughter, something's going on, let's go have an ice cream. Let's go get to the Starbucks. You can replace ice cream with something. Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a this. Just you and me. Let's just talk, right? And that's where you can find out. So changes in social interaction, a baby might not laugh or smile or respond to the face. That's different, right? That's something that you would you would tell the pediatrician. So, and then spiritual, that yani, if a person's spirituality changes, like they don't make the salah anymore, or they're angry with God, with Allah, for whatever reason, that's not something to just beat the kid over because you're offended, because it's just going to keep happening. That's the time for what? Ice cream. Yes, I know I said it's destructive, and I'm an integrative and holistic physician, and ice cream doesn't fit in a good diet. But if it helps your kid, go out for ice cream, or go out for a coffee, or a tea, or whatever. Or just go and sit in the backyard, just you and them. And you say, hey, I noticed you said these words about Allah. You know, that's fine. Your relationship is yours between you and Allah, but I just want to understand. Can you tell me what's going on? And then, inshallah, that the child will share with you. Okay, so what is depression? So you can see here in a pictorial way that this kid with the hood is sitting by himself, right? So they avoid interaction with other people. He hasn't eaten, so appetite goes down. Appetite could go up as well, like you stress eat, or you restrict, right? Or sleep can go up where you just don't feel like getting out of bed, or sleep can go down where you just can't sleep. So both things can happen, all right? And then talking about suicide, withdrawal from friends. And the next slide, if there are any medical students here, any medical students? No medical students? Okay, so this is an acronym called SIG-E-CAPS, SIG-E-CAPS. Every medical student knows this. So the first letter of each symptom is represented in SIG-E-CAPS. So there's sleep problems, the I is decreased interests in stuff like they like to play ball and they don't play ball anymore. They like to knit and sew or whatever, they don't do that. They like to go for walks, they don't do that. Feelings of guilt or low self-esteem. Energy decreased, concentration, appetite up or down, increased activity or decreased activity, and then suicidal thoughts. Okay, so the symptoms of depression you can look up online. So we're not going to spend too much time. Let's talk about anxiety. All right, so before I go to that's a really thick slide. So there are a couple of different types of anxiety. One type of anxiety is the one that is always there. It's like you look at the ocean and on the surface of it, it looks fine, but underneath it, there's a lot of turbulence. So that's a type of anxiety that you're always worried about everything all the time, constantly. Even stuff that you're like, I don't know why I'm worried about this, right? And then there's a type of anxiety that comes in like a tsunami, and then it goes out for a while. Can be for hours, minutes, days, months, years, and boom, it comes back in, hits you like a ton of bricks. And when it hits you, you feel like that tiger just escaped from the zoo, and there it is in front of me. And that's the feeling, racing heart, rapid breathing, sweating, feeling hot or feeling cold, right? Feeling clammy, feeling like you're gonna faint just there. Right? That's the ton of bricks type of anxiety. That's like panicking. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I'm going to die. Right? That's called panic attack. Right? So biologically speaking, racing heart, psychologically speaking, a sense of terror. Right? Socially speaking, avoiding social gatherings and so on and so forth. So two different types of anxiety. One is just below the surface, always there. And one comes in like a wave and goes out. So it ebbs and flows, ebbs and flows. Okay. So there are different types of anxiety. Now, we're not going to spend time on this slide because this is stuff you can look up on Google, on Sheikh Google. This I'm okay with Sheikh Google because Sheikh Google, he can give a fatwa on these. That's fine. So generalized type anxiety, generalized, the one that's under the surface, always there. And then the panic disorder that comes like a ton of bricks and goes, right? And then OCD is another type of anxiety as well. Okay, so when is it concerning? How many of you have ever taken a test? Were you anxious before the test? How many of you have ever given a lecture? Were you anxious before the lecture? Sure, right? So anxiety makes sense. But would we call it a problem? When do we call it a problem? You had your hand up?
Actually, I have a question. When you mentioned that OCD is a type of anxiety.
Yes. OCD is a type of anxiety. Yes, so the question was, is OCD a type of anxiety? It is a type of anxiety. You can look it up a little bit online or we can talk afterwards, but it's the type of anxiety where you feel like Couple of different things. So you feel like everything needs to be in order, or you feel like I'm constantly unclean, and so I have to keep washing and washing. And then sometimes we develop rituals, even in our salawat, that I haven't prayed properly. And so then I have to go back and pray. Or I didn't make wudu, and so it takes me hours to make wudu, right? Because, yes, it's true. Every single hair has to be wet. That's fiqh, right? But then, oh no, did I really wet it? Did I break my wudu? So the Prophet ﷺ said, if you think you have wudu, khalas, you have wudu. Right? Just to break that OCD, that, oh no, I got to make wudu again, no, because, so OCD is a type of anxiety. So when does it become concerning? When it takes hours and hours. So if it interferes with your social functioning, when it starts to interfere with your occupational or educational or whatever functioning, if it interferes and you just need hours and hours of checking the locks on the door, you have to unlock and lock in patterns. I got to unlock it 7 times and relock it 7 times, and then I have to walk away, and then I have to come back and then lock it and unlock it. You know, this is what happens. Checking the stove, checking the iron, checking the locks all around the house. So when it interferes with your ability to function. All right, let's talk about treatment. So isn't it interesting that a psychiatrist who prescribes medication, the first slide for treatment is what? Talk therapy. Because if you come to me with a broken leg and I put the cast on for 12 weeks, khalas, we do the x-ray, it looks, the femur is healed, we take off the cast and I say, akhi, go home, you're good. Did I do right by you? No, you said no, interesting. Did I do right by you if I do that? No, okay, so I have 2 no's, everyone else is like, I don't know. Okay, why didn't I do right by you? Rehabilitation. Because for 12 weeks, your muscles have been immobile. So you lose muscle mass. And so if I don't tell you that you have to go back and regain your strength, then I didn't do you a service. So if you come to me and I say, here, take Prozac, which is an antidepressant, and I say, go home, I didn't teach you any additional new skills to deal with the depression. And so the therapy is the actual treatment. The medication is just the crutches to get you to the therapy. Does that make sense, guys? So if you are only on a medication, that's not enough. Okay, I have to start cutting down. All right. So in this, the cognitive behavioral therapy is super important. And then we've got the medications, which antidepressants, and then anti-anxiety medications, and beta blockers for and so on and so forth. So here we also have something called TMS, which is where you take magnetic signals and you apply them to the brain like an MRI machine. You apply them to the brain and you can actually get brain growth and treatment, and it helps with anxiety and depression. So, and then also you've got supplements. In particular, there's a supplement called inositol, which really helps with anxiety, but it causes diarrhea. So I would recommend that if you get inositol, you look on the directions in the back and cut it down by 1/4. And then start taking that, put it in a big bottle of water, and sip that throughout the day. And that really helps with anxiety. And then there are meditations, mindfulness, and even salah is a mindfulness meditation where you're supposed to be present and hear and thoughtful about what you're saying before Allah. And so what to look for is a functional medicine doctor, integrative psychiatrist or doctor, nutritional psychiatrist, somebody that has familiarity with these things. And so what we have been doing up until now is trying to fit the square peg in the round hole. Our kids are round, or our kids are the square. And we're trying to fit them into the same mold that we grew up in, but they're growing up in a very different environment. And so even in the Quran, Allah commands us that in this, I wish I could go through these ayat. 2 minutes, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. So I wish I could go through these ayat, but in blue it says, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ, meaning that they seek counsel from one another. They seek counsel. That, Yani, so what's the problem with coming and asking me a question that, hey, what's going on with my child? And so this is the information for our center up in Coppell, not very far from here. And in fact, Irving Pediatrics will send you guys to us. And we have cards here. And so I'd like to break for Salah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.
If you like, you can continue after Salah too.
If folks want to do questions after Salah, we can do questions after Salah.
Yes, inshallah. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
استووا استقيموا الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. يا أيها الناس أنتم الفقراء إلى الله والله هو الغني الحميد. إن يشأ يذهبكم ويأت بخلق جديد وما ذلك على الله بعزيز. ولا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى وإن تدع مثقلة إلى حملها لا يحمل منه شيء ولو كان ذا قربى. إنما تنذر الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب وأقاموا الصلاة. من تزكى فإنما يتزكى لنفسه وإلى الله المصير. وما يستوي الأعمى والبصير ولا الظلمات ولا النور ولا الظل ولا الحرور. وما يستوي الأحياء ولا الأموات. إن الله يسمع من يشاء وما أنت بمسمع من في القبور إن أنت إلا نذير. إنا أرسلناك بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا وإن من أمة إلا خلا فيها نذير. وإن يكذبوك فقد كذب الذين من قبلهم جاءتهم رسلهم بالبينات وبالزبر وبالكتاب المنير. ثم أخذت الذين